Over the past few weeks, the hardcore community has lost some pretty incredible people. Most notably to me, Bo Louders from Harm's Way and the Hardlore podcast, and Matt Kropansky, who's the drummer for Boy Sets Fire. While I knew Matt quite well back in the day, I didn't know Bo at all. But I find myself mourning their losses in a very deep and meaningful way. And I don't think that's an accident. I actually believe it is a beautiful and intentional byproduct of what makes hardcore so fucking cool in the first place. The first time I ever saw two friends hugging was at a hardcore show. I was 13 at the Cobalt Cafe in Canoga Park. It was the kind of venue that seems to exist purely just to allow misfit adolescents to do sketchy shit out of the purview of their parents with relatively low consequences. Sticky carpets, damp couches, and a $6 cover, $5 with a flyer. As a freshman in high school with really cool parents, I was already about 4 years into my punk rock indoctrination. I had gone from Green Day and Rancid to Operation Ivy and Fat Records, from using a cassette to record songs off the radio to taking trips to Home Depot so that I could build my own chain necklaces. I was a good kid. But I wasn't good at the kind of things good kids should be good at. I sucked at school, I sucked at sports, and really any of the kind of stuff that a boy might be able to lean on for an identity while his voice drops. Instead, I found skateboarding and punk rock. And with that, there were a few ways things could have gone. In the first 2 weeks of high school, I found myself not behaving like myself. I was skipping classes and getting high under bridges. Not because I really enjoyed it, but because I didn't have a good reason to stop myself from doing it when the other kids who sucked at sports in school told me that this is what we were supposed to do, that these were our extracurricular activities. And then a friend from summer camp asked if I wanted to sleep over one weekend so we could go to a hardcore show together. Well, I didn't know what that meant. I thought it sounded really cool, and it would definitely impress my fellow fuck-ups when we were ditching ceramics class on Monday, so I went. My friend from summer camp had changed significantly from the last time I saw him. He had swapped out his Liberty spikes and suspenders for a high and tight crop top and New Balance sneakers. Probably the most significant changes were the X's that he had penned with a Sharpie on the backs of his hands. My friend from summer camp was now straight edge. A thing I didn't think people actually did. A thing that I'd only been introduced to from a NoFX parody of the Minor Threat anthem by the same name. Basically, he didn't drink or do drugs for a litany of social and philosophical principles that are significantly too complicated and contentious for this story. But if I could summarize, he did it to be a little different and a little better, and I really liked that. On the way to the show, he introduced me to the hardcore music that had inspired this new lifestyle. Bands like Strife, Youth of Today, Ensign. To the untrained ear, this stuff was pretty unlistenable. I loved heavy music at the time, but to me, this just sort of sounded like punk rock without any of the fun parts. It was so serious, and I was very much not looking forward to going to this show. But that all changed the moment we pulled to the parking lot, and someone literally jumped into my lap through the passenger window. It was like they were so excited that it created a gravity that they couldn't resist. Everyone, and I mean everyone, was smiling and having a good time. People, mostly boys and young men, greeted each other with open arms. There was almost a disarming level of friendliness and innocence. No one was trying to get liquor or drugs, and instead, it was like all of that energy was just reinvested in being in the moment, in having stupid adolescent fun. They were dancing in the parking lot, doing backflips off the hood of cars. This was the teenage hood that I really wanted. When the band started, it was like dropping Mentos into a Diet Coke. The energy literally could not be contained by the vessel, and the room exploded. What hadn't translated through my friend's brittle stock speakers was that what happens at a hardcore show is a sort of alchemy between the band on stage and the crowd. They are less performers and more like carnival barkers beckoning you into the wonder of the moment. It was violent without aggression, and there was no real separation between what was happening in the pit and the musicians. It was a kind of flattening of hierarchy that made the whole thing feel like something we were doing together, like a community. I was sold. From that moment, and for a decade after, I was straight edge. And I can say without any hyperbole that hardcore was one of the best things that ever fucking happened to me. Within a week, I had dropped my ceramics class and signed up for student government. I stopped hanging out with those sad stoner kids, and while I was still bad at school, I didn't feel like it meant that I had to be a bad person. I could just find my own way to be in the world, and I have been finding it ever since. In the 3 decades since I went to that hardcore show, hardcore has evolved. It has grown to become both more complicated and inclusive, but perhaps one of my favorite parts is the way those of us who were involved in some way in the scene bond immediately when we're out in the wild, like alumni or veterans. As my friend Norman Brannon once said, if you hang out long enough, you get to become friends with your heroes. Because of that, when the community loses someone, it feels like we mourn them in a way that is different than losing a celebrity. It feels like we are losing a friend. And I think it has a lot to do with what I felt in that room when I was 13, that the show, the band, the violence, the parking lot, the flattening of hierarchy, it is all just a performance so that we, the people who did not fit in other places, have a place to be in the world. So if you are feeling this more than you expected, I encourage you to let yourself feel it deeply.